Personality disorder and Munchausen's by proxy does not mean that you do not know what you are doing. You know the actions that you are doing and you know the consequences.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. One of the most important skills one needs as an investigator, especially when it comes to serial killer cases, but yes, true crime in general, is pattern recognition. What patterns are there in the Lucy Letby case? What patterns have you recognized? Over many years writing books about true crime, one thing has emerged that I've found is impossible, or if not impossible, very difficult for criminals to conceal or hide. That is the timeline. What do we fathom from this one? We haven't dealt with the timeline in much detail so far, and we won't do that here, other than to focus on one particular area. Let's look at the timeline now in early June 2015 more closely. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. A warm welcome to the thousands of you who have subscribed. This weekend, I'm going to try to cover another serial killer, Rex Heuermann. And I think what you're going to find interesting, if you find this case interesting, is the aspects in that case that are similar and the aspects that aren't similar. And that is going to sharpen your critical thinking in both cases. So look out for that. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment. Bear in mind, I don't really do many lives on this channel. So if you want to show your appreciation, you can hit the thanks button and let's get started. Now, according to the Daily Mail, according to their timeline, on June 7th at 8:31 p.m., baby A boy, this boy was born a few moments ahead of his twin sister baby B, and he's in good condition when he's born. Then on June 8th, Lucy returns to work after a trip to York, and that needs to be emphasized, that she just returned after making a trip. Remember, we're trying to look for patterns here. And it's on this day, this is the first day that we know of, that Lucy will claim the life of her first victim, baby A. Now, if you drill into the timeline in a little bit more detail, Lucy arrives at work at 8 p.m., right? At this stage, baby A has been alive for almost 24 hours. And up until this point, he's been looked after by a neonatal nurse, Melanie Taylor. He's in a stable condition. Everything is fine. Now, Nurse Taylor hands over the care of baby A to Lucy Letby, and together they start the fluids via the long line. Then 26 minutes later, baby A collapses. And at this point, Lucy, I think, is alone in the unit, and she then calls Dr. Harkness over to baby A's incubator. The baby is deteriorating rapidly at this point. Then about 32 minutes later, at 8:58 p.m., just before 9 o'clock, less than an hour after Lucy has started on the night shift, baby A is pronounced dead. He's died within 90 minutes of Lucy coming on duty. Now, if we zoom out, that's kind of the trees version of one particular death in June. Lots of detail there. If we zoom out in terms of the timeline, so in terms of total incidents, there are 16 involving Lucy in 2015 and 9 additional incidents involving Lucy in 2016. And this is where it gets quite difficult, but also quite interesting, is trying to see patterns within patterns. We see the months where the most deaths are June 2015, 3, and June 2016, 2. In sum, 5 of the 7 murders Lucy was convicted for, that's over 70%, occurred in the month of June. The largest total of incidents in any one month was June 2015 with 7 incidents and 3 deaths, followed by June 2016 by 6 incidents and 2 deaths. Meanwhile, after the spikes in June, there are no incidents whatsoever in July 2015 or 2016 relating to Lucy. The only month that comes close in terms of the sheer number of incidents is September 2015, where there are 5 incidents but no fatalities. There are also 2 key differences to note in terms of the deaths and incidents in June 2015 and June 2016. Firstly, in June 2015, 4 out of 4 incidents, including 3 deaths, in other words, 100%, occurred during the night shift when Lucy was the only nurse on duty. Secondly, in June 2016, the first 2 incidents, which were not fatal, occurred during the night shift. In one instance, Lucy was the only nurse on night shift, while on the second, there was one other nurse on duty. The remaining 4 incidents in June of 2016, including 2 fatalities, all occurred during a day shift when there were 3 nurses on duty, including Lucy, with the exception of the final incident on June 25th, when Lucy was the only nurse on duty. And it was immediately following these incidents, when other nurses were on duty in June 2016, that Lucy would reach out to Dr. A. It should also be noted that on June 23rd, following the death of baby O, Dr. A communicated with Lucy on Facebook. This was immediately after that, simply asking at 8:54, "Are you okay?" A week later, and at the end of that month, Lucy is removed from the unit. Now, I don't think it's sufficient to say that the number one clue we all missed has something to do with June. A kindergarten kid can see that there's something going on in June. The question is, why then? Specifically, what is happening in June? So, well, let's return to the more detailed timeline. Now we're going to go back about a week. June 1st, Lucy moves back into Ash House. That's the nurses' accommodation on site, on the hospital's sort of on-site accommodation. And she remains there until moving into a semi-detached home in Westburn Road in April 2016, right? April 2016 is just 2 months before those final few murders in June 2016. And so her sadistic killing spree begins just after she moves into Ash House. Between June 5th and June 7th, Lucy is in York attending a hen party for her friend, and her friend is also a nursery nurse on the unit. Her name is Jennifer Jones Key. And what is a hen party? It's a party for a woman who's going to get married soon. So what is happening is Lucy's seeing her own colleagues that are getting married. And the question is she? And does she have a boyfriend? And how does she feel about other people becoming happy couples? And so this is a situation where a lot of her peers, a lot of other Countess of Chester nurses are on the same trip. And they're all fussing around one particular nurse who's about to get married. And how does this reflect on Lucy's psyche? It must affect her psyche in some way, because immediately following that trip is when the first baby in this whole long line of dead babies starts. But they travel by train and they drink cocktails in the Revolution Bar. And then the next thing, Lucy, and only Lucy, is the only nurse back at work on June 8th. She's alone at work on a Monday night. So 2 or 3 things seem to be taking place in June when Lucy's attacks on babies in her care commence and increase. And there are a heck of a lot of attacks in June 15. I think you could say the most during her entire career, right? So let's have a look at 2 things that stand out. Now remember, we don't have all the answers. We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to figure out patterns within patterns, underlying patterns, right? So let's see what we can come up with. So number 1, it's summer. And what happens in summer in the UK? So June of every year is summer. Well, what happens? People travel, people go on holidays, people have parties. Isn't it because of these social activities that are increasing? Isn't it the social aspect to June? Isn't that having some kind of impact on Lucy, especially where she ends up working alone on the night shift in the middle of this? And that raises the question, does Lucy want to be alone? And if you think about where Lucy is at the end of all of this, she's in an affair with a married man, or at least she seems to be. And so based on that, are we dealing with someone who wants to be alone or doesn't want to be alone? And it's an interesting question relative to this idea of her moving away from her parents. So in that sense, she's now living alone. And so the question is, would she prefer to be alone, or would she prefer to be in a relationship with someone? Well, what do you think is the average for someone in their 20s? And like Casey Anthony, you see a lot of photos of Lucy going out, seemingly having fun. What do you think all of that is about? Now, it's interesting that in the middle of summer in June 2015, Lucy is the only miserable soul on night duty in the hospital, and that is when all hell breaks loose. It also follows hot on the heels of a party that is about a woman getting married just the previous weekend. Is that the trigger? Remember, June 5th, when they went to this party in York, was a Friday. June 8th, when the first attack took place, was a Monday night. It's Lucy's first shift following that party. So what do you think she's thinking about? The second fatal attack occurred on a Saturday night, a weekend when she was once again alone in the ward, a weekend. Where was everyone else? The third fatal attack in June occurred on a Sunday night on June the 21st, again in the context of a weekend. What do people do on weekends? Add the 3 days together and they are all basically on or adjacent to a weekend in summer. Saturday night, Sunday night, Monday night. The final fatality in the timeline, in terms of the entire timeline, occurred on a Friday on June 24th, 2016. Then the second dimension to all this, although it's not clear whether Dr. A was working in 2015 or whether anything had developed with Dr. A in 2015, we do know he was on the scene by June the following year, and that subsequent to an incident, he would communicate with Lucy, he would interact with Lucy, and occasionally drive Lucy home. Once again, the question arises, does Lucy want to be alone or not? Also, what does Lucy want? So, have you figured out the number one clue we all missed? The number one clue we all missed was that on both occasions, prior to these serial deaths in June 2015 and June 2016, Lucy had just moved. We also know that as an only child, she lived with her parents for a long time and was doted on by them. She even went on holiday with them, and thus, in both occasions, June 2015 and June 2016, Lucy suddenly found herself not only alone in a new home, and that certainly aggravates it, but alone in the ward. And not only alone in the ward, but alone while other people were out having fun. And that also aggravates that feeling of insufficiency. They're out there having fun when she isn't, when she's working. Could this social dynamic, this is a question, could this social dynamic in combination with the rootlessness one sometimes feels following a move, could that have triggered something restless and ruthless in Lucy within that social dynamic that is summer, June in the United Kingdom? Does that make sense? Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.